Hello and welcome to another one of the Michigan Military Technical and Historical Society Museum COVID-19 shutdown virtual tours. So today I'm going to shoot a couple different videos, and we're going to look at the special exhibit we had going on this winter called the Jeeps of Ford. At the moment we have 3 Jeeps in the museum made by the Ford Motor Company, representing, I believe, 3 of the 4 models of Jeep that were made by Ford in any quantity. So we're going to start with the oldest. So right in front of us we have a 1941 Ford GP, which is one of the prototype Jeeps that was submitted to the United States Army in 1941 when they put out the call for a new vehicle. So in 1940, the United States government, United States Army, decided they needed a new vehicle, and they posted a requirement for a vehicle that was a maximum of 36 inches high, maximum of 1,000 pounds in weight. It had to be able to carry at least 2 men, 1 machine gun, and 3,000 rounds of ammunition. They wanted it to be 4-wheel drive with cross-country capability. They were hoping to get face armor for the driver, and they also were looking to get amphibious capability, was desired but not a requirement. The first prototype that was submitted to the government was the Bantam Car Company of Butler, Pennsylvania, and that was on 23 September 1940. Willis Overland delivered their version on 11 November 1940. And Ford submitted 2 prototypes on 23 November 1940 as well. Ford submitted 2 different prototypes. One had a Ford designed body on it, which is what we're looking at, and the other one was a Budd designed body. And the government liked the Ford body better, so I believe there was only one of the Budd body Jeeps built. The government went ahead and they placed an order for 1,500 vehicles from each company. So there were initially 1,500 built and delivered to the government for testing. In testing, the Ford body design showed greater promise, but the Willis had a better engine and transmission. I believe that an overall design, what became the standardized wartime Jeep, shares more DNA with this Ford designed vehicle than it does with the Willis designed vehicle. And I guess we'll kind of start up here in the front. This is the Ford design. They put the headlights underneath the hood behind the grille. Both the Willis and the Bantam had the more traditional, where the hood pinched in at the front and the headlights were mounted on the fenders. And then Ford, and the Budd design Ford submission also had that. So the Ford Budd entry and the Willis and the Bantam were very similar. And then the Ford, what would be called the GP, was the what we see in front of us here. So here we see the engine compartment of the Ford GP, showing the Ford tractor engine that they selected, which ended up not being, I think that was the downfall of this particular design, and why the government didn't go with it, is because the Willis engine was much better. The Willis, the 134 cubic inch Go Devil engine, was a pretty solid engine for its day, and definitely gave a much better performance than the Ford engine did. This was mated up to a Model A 3-speed transmission, and then which connected to a Spicer 2-speed transfer case, and then eventually ran Spicer 25 or 27 axles. All 3, I believe, and I know Willis and Ford, and I believe the Bantam as well, all used the same Spicer transfer case and Spicer axles. Those were pretty standard at that point in time. Ford also introduced this idea here. They have the headlights that are hinged and will flip up so that you can shine the headlight on the engine and so that you can work on it at night. That was one of the things that the government liked, and that ended up in the standardized wartime production Jeep. Walking around the vehicle, Ford also introduced on theirs this rear seat that folded. You can see it's hinged down here at the bottoms, where this bottom would flip up, and then the whole thing would drop down and increase your cargo carrying capability. They also had the two toolboxes on either side. These are all features that ended up making their way into the standardized wartime Jeep. You can see the front seats. You have the handbrake on the floor, like you have in the Model A. Then you have the two shifters for your four-wheel drive, in and out, four-wheel drive, high and low. And then Ford used an off-the-shelf dash. I believe this was the dash from the 39 or the 40 Ford pickup. Don't know that. Remember that off the top of my head. I'd have to go back and look it up. I think it was the 39 or 40 Ford pickup dash. So you can see, I mean, there's a lot. If you're familiar with the standard wartime Jeep, there's a lot of things here that are very recognizable as far as the layout goes. So we'll step back and we'll take a look at the overall vehicle again. We'll give you a little history, a little background. So November 1940, 23rd November 1940, Ford delivered the two prototype Pygmies to the U.S. Army for testing. They both used the same chassis. And but as I said, the Ford was underpowered and the gearbox was weak. The Willys MA was eventually chosen because it had a better drive line, although the T84 transmission that Willys selected was also not. Anybody who's owned a wartime Jeep, knows the T84 was not the strongest transmission, and almost immediately after the war they went to the T90, but they stuck with the T84 through the war, most likely because they didn't want to introduce a whole new transmission into the supply pipeline and slow down production. So the engine on this was 119.5 cubic inch, 4-cylinder, developed 84 foot-pounds of torque. It was the Fordson Model N tractor engine, and had an 80-inch wheelbase, which was one of the requirements, and it weighed 2,160 pounds. None of the three prototypes were anywhere near the 1,000-pound mark. They were all overweight, so that didn't matter. And none of them were amphibious, and none of them had armor. The Ford GP, eventually there were 4,500 of them built and delivered to the United States government, and they were used for testing. The one we have here is a later production, and it's on loan to the museum from the collection of Eric Richardson. It was supposed to go back to him this spring. With this COVID-19 stuff, I don't know how much longer it's going to be here, or if he's even ready to take it back, or how we get it back to him with all the social distancing rules. So wanted to give you a chance to kind of look at it, because I don't think very many people got to see the Jeeps of Ford exhibit before we were shut down. So this is the first one, and then we're going to go ahead and I'm going to jump over to one of the other Ford Jeeps, and that'll be another video that we'll post a little bit later. So until then, everybody stay safe and stay healthy, and we'll see you soon.